Wow. No,
Incredible.
but this is positional mastery in a bullet game, and this is unprecedented.
We just witnessed the greatest bullet game of 2023. Daniel Naroditsky is absolutely not exaggerating. Magnus Carlsen has just given us a positional masterpiece, but with a checkmating finish that is just sublime. Played on seconds, and in the Speed Chess Championship bullet section, this thing is one for the ages. So Magnus playing with black, and we're just going to enjoy these amazing moves and not go too off on other variations. So e4 from Vidit, Caro Khan on the board from Magnus, and now d3, an unusual way to play, inviting a queen trade and ruining of the king position. Like, dude, you know you're playing the greatest endgame player of all time and you swap the queens. Good luck to you. Now we get knight f6, so the pawn doesn't kick on, the knight's got plenty of squares, the knight now drops back, covering the pawn, weird looking move to move that one twice, obviously a pet system for Vidit, and now Magnus plays a move that would probably be like number 7, 8 on your list of candidate moves. If you were thinking of sensible moves here, he goes for pawn to g5. But this is actually a theoretical move when you start running this stuff. Really interesting, you start to clamp on the dark squares. So knight c3, knight bd7, this knight spins to b3. That's the idea of Vidit's knight maneuver. He opens the bishop, attacking that pawn, and so Magnus carries on with g4. Vidit goes f4, gaining some space of his own. Magnus takes on passant, we get captures, and now the knight hits e5, pressures that pawn, daring white to go f4, give up control of g4 to 3 different minor pieces, not what you want to do. So instead bishop e2 is played to cover, and now the knight voluntarily retreats, eyeing up the f4 square. So a4 now played, gaining space. We get knight h5, starting to probe some more, and after bishop e3, one of those knights already hops into that square. h4 played, looking to dislodge the knight, then you can capture this one. And now Magnus doesn't play the most natural move, you might say, knee-jerk reaction in bullet, you go h5 yourself, stop the pawn progressing. He plays the second top engine move of knight g2. He's just seeing the board differently. Bishop f2, and now bishop h6 played, and this is where I had some fun drawing the arrows for the thumbnail. Look at the dark square domination already, and the way this king is cut and in the center.
Wow.
Incredible.
No, but this is positional mastery in a bullet game, and this is unprecedented.
So h5 played, kicks this knight. It could come here, but it jumps into e5 instead. And now we get knight c5, probing against this b7 pawn, making it difficult for the bishop to develop, support this c4 square with this knight. So we get knight e3 check. And because of the way the king is, you don't want to step to this line here, walk into the bishop, but you do need to cover the pawn. So white here is forced to chop off the knight and look at that bishop at its absolute best, spraying in all directions, absolute monster on the dark squares. So the knight attacked, it retreats. Now we get bishop d4, the knight captured, bishop takes back, still a monster piece in the center of the board. King d2 played, but bishop f4, not so fast, kicks the king back, bishop e6, a5, castles queenside, and now a mistake from Vidit. He should go rook d1 and challenge the file, or bishop d3, but he goes king f2 and allows this invasion from Magnus, hitting the c2 pawn, defended by the rook, but walking into the line of the bishop. Now rook g8, activating another piece. Look at the pieces I've highlighted, all super active. White getting into a bit of a bind. And now knight b1 is played, trying to kick this rook away. And Magnus actually had a tactic here, which he missed, but it's a really deep tactic. So he maybe saw this idea. He did start calculating. Rook g2 check. Because if captures, you can take here with check. But after king f1, hitting your rook, if you take this rook, white takes here and actually is doing better and exchange ahead. So this is probably where Magnus got to in his calculation and stopped. But if here, instead of taking this rook, you go bishop c4, this is the in-between move, which is a killer, because you're threatening to take this and threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. It's too much for white to cope with. But that's a deep tactic. Not easy to see this silent bishop c4 move. So Magnus retreats that rook. Now we get the rook challenging the g file. Bishop c7 retreats, attacks the a pawn. Vidit covers with b4. We get c5, breaking up those pawns. c3 captures, pawn recaptures, and bishop d6. Magnus using that bishop pair, absolute lasers. Now we get takes. The rook recaptures. Vidit wants to free this one up to check on the c file. The king goes to b8 and now pawn b5. Vidit rumbles those pawns on. Plus this one was attacked. Rook g5 activating, hitting the h5 pawn. And I like how Vidit plays now. You know, they're playing on very low time. He doesn't actually defend the pawn, although that is the top computer move. He plays knight to d2, reactivating that piece which was on the back rank, covering these squares, and if Magnus takes, well then you get f4. You open the bishop, the rook goes somewhere, but now you could be going f5, or maybe your knight starts hopping, you know, you're getting counterplay. So what does Magnus do? He leaves the pawn and goes bishop c5 check, supported by the rook, so it can't be taken. The king moves away, and now bishop b4, creating a pin, attacking this pawn. Just deadly stuff from Magnus. And if you save the pawn like this, well then there's rook g1 check. If the king goes, well obviously this is no good. You lose your rook. You can't block with the knight, it's pinned. And if you go bishop f1, well then you can go for this end game. Good for black with the bishop pair. You know, so many difficult, tricky tactics. So instead, we see rook c2 played to cover this knight. But now the pawn drops. f4 played, opening the bishop to defend this pawn, hitting the rook. We see check, but here Vidit, he makes a blunder. He should actually cover with the bishop, but even then that's a losing move because you can take here, rook recaptures, and then bishop c4, hitting this one. And if rook f2, you pick up the pawn. It's just a dead lost endgame. So we didn't see blocks with the bishop, which was best, but still losing. We saw king f2. And now this sets up an absolutely sublime checkmating finish. It's mate in 3. Can you find the combination? So the way to do this is with bishop b6 check. Look at the way that bishop x-rays the rook, protecting it, but also checking the king. Now, if you go rook c5, give away a piece, that's how you get mate in 3. But if you play the sensible king f3, the only available square, then bishop g4 shuts the trap. That is checkmate using the rook and bishops. What an absolutely stunning finish. Positional masterclass from Magnus Carlsen. I hope you enjoyed this game. If you want to see another epic game of chess, do check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.